and gold of Amador.
My name is Mavis Eugenia Fiorio, and I married Williams. I attended Amador High School in 1940, graduated in 1944. I attended elementary grammar school in Pleasanton.
Well, my name is Lynn Moller Skarratt, and I attended Amador from 1957, I guess, through 61. I graduated in 1961, and I actually only went to school for 1 year in Pleasanton. I went to kindergarten in Pleasanton, and I was in Mrs. Harris's class. But I was just here for kindergarten because actually we lived in Dublin, and so I was in the Murray School District, and but Murray School didn't have kindergarten, so I was allowed to come to kindergarten in Pleasanton. And then for first grade, I went back to the old Murray School, which was built in 1856, and graduated from Murray. And there were only 2 people in my class when I was in the 8th grade, me and Sherry Lafayette, and we were the only ones in the 8th grade. So coming to Amador was a bit of a shock, really, because it was so big and there were so many people there, and it was very, very different from my grammar school experience. A little bit intimidating.
Joni Momquist Fields, 1961 to 63, grew up out on Sycamore, LSL, Happy Valley, which at the time people used to call it Chicken Alley. Went kindergarten through 11th grade.
My name is Rick Garibaldi, grew up on 2nd Street in Pleasanton, class of 67. Went to the Pleasanton Elementary School for my early education. And my parents had a clothing store on Main Street. A lot of the patrons that would come in the store were high school kids, and they were buying their letter sweaters. And of course, I would try to talk to all the guys that came in. Most of all, I would sit out in front of the store, and at age 6 would say hi to everybody that walked by, whether or not they came into the store. So that was about the time where I decided I wanted to be an Amador Don, which was age 6, because I wanted to be just like these high school kids that were buying their sweaters. I wanted to get one.
My name's Tom Wilson, and I attended my junior and senior years from 66 to 68 at Amador High School. I was born in Oakland and raised in San Leandro, went to school, grammar school, junior high school, and my first 2 years of high school at Marina High School in San Leandro. Dad had been in several business attempts with Don McKenzie, who was an old insurance guy here. His son Guy was almost exactly my age, but I came out to visit Guy, spent the weekend, and there was a track meet across the street. Guy lived right in that subdivision, Jensen track right across the street. And we went over, and they were having a track meet, and I asked one of the officials, can I throw? Because I had just started throwing it at Marina High School as a sophomore. And he said, sure, why not? And so I threw in my shorts and t-shirt and won the meet. And the guys that I competed against were friendly. They shared their lunch, on and on. And when Dad made a little more money, he said we can move to up the hills in San Leandro or Pleasanton, and I said Pleasanton. It's got to be Pleasanton.
Hello, my name is Frank Jensen.
I attended Amador Valley High School from 1967 to 1970.
I'm Adelia Loder, and I attended Amador Valley High School from 1967 to 1970.
And Paul Campana, I attended Amador High School from 1974 to 1978.
Started school at Pleasanton Elementary for kindergarten and part of first grade. Then we moved across town, and I went to Alisal until I was in the 6th grade. Back to Pleasanton Elementary for 7th and 8th, and then on to Amador for high school.
Great. And what about you, Frank?
Well, Adelia and I are childhood neighbors. We lived right next door to each other, and for the first few years. And I'm actually the second generation of Valley. My grandpa's ranch is where the San Ramon Senior Center stands today, and my family were cattle ranchers, and my dad then worked for Kaiser Sand and Gravel, so the Flintstones was always a great show for us to watch, and it's been a great time growing up here in Pleasanton.
Great. And what about you, Paul?
So my parents moved here in '59. Obviously, my dad was the band director from '59 to '79, and we lived in the Jensen track with a lot of other teachers that he taught with at Amador High School. And then we moved. I went to Alisal Elementary School for kindergarten, and then we moved into Vintage Hills, and that's kind of where my parents, before they retired and left and moved to Sonora, I basically went to Valley View, and then I went to Pleasanton Elementary School. I was there from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade at that time. It was the middle school, and then went on to Amador High School. But, I said I went to Amador from 74 to 78. The reality is it was really from the time I was born to the time my dad retired. I was there all the time.
Tony Gaviglia was assistant band director at Amador High School, 63 to 66. Yeah, Tim Campana gave me my first gig, my first job right out of college, and working with Tim Campana was exquisite. He caring, heartful, smart, and talented, and his love for the students was amazing. He really cared for the kids and worked, and the kids produced because of his cooperation.
My name's Lori Davis. When I was at Amador, Pavich now. And I moved to Amador the middle of my freshman year, which was January 1970, and I graduated the 50th graduating class of Amador in June of 1973.
My name is Eric Otis Nostrand. I'm the class of '81, the best. Our family moved here in the late '60s, went to school at the Besco School, went from Besco to Pleasanton Elementary and the Valley View, and then back to elementary and off to Amador. So I was at Amador from 1977 until I graduated in 1981, and I did graduate.
My name is Kathleen Hart-Hinek, but during those days I was Kathleen Hart. So grew up in Pleasanton. My family came here in 1965, and I went to Valley View Elementary, Pleasanton Elementary, which was actually middle school, and Amador High School.
My name is Christina Nystrom, though before college I went by Tina, and I grew up here in Pleasanton. I started school in 3rd grade at Walnut Grove, and then went to Harvest Park and was at Amador from 1992 until I graduated in 1996.
Michael Bruner. I graduated from Amador in '99, so I first went there in freshman year was '96, starting at '95.
Okay.
I first was at Valley View for 4th and 5th grade, then I went to PMS, and then I went to Amador. I believe that made me a little unusual because I was told 90% of the kids who went to PMS went to Foothill, and most of the kids who went to Amador came from Harvest Park. So the few people that I knew in middle school did not follow me to Amador, and that was That was tough.
Wipfli, and I was class of 2013 at Amador. I was there from years 2009 to 2013.
This is Joseph Recupero, and I went to Amador from 2016 to 2020. I was born and raised up on Santa Rita Road, and all four of my sisters went to Amador, and I went to Amador as well.
Hi, my name is Lucie Bernard, and I went to Amador from 2019 to 2023.
My mother was Lily Mae Schneider, who had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. My mother wanted an education very bad. They didn't have a high school here in Pleasanton. So for a few days, she had a horse and buggy, went to Livermore, and then she went to San Jose, and then World War I broke out, and her brother was helping her financially, and so she had to go to work.
This is my parents' graduating class. They graduated in 1935. They met in 1933. My mother's family moved to Dublin in 1933, and my parents met and they started dating. And this is my mother, and this is my father. My mother was Evelyn Boero, and my father was Harold Moller. And this is another relative, Helen Cronin. Her sister married my mother's brother, and I really don't know for sure anybody else's name. And we got this picture in a strange way because a friend of my parents, I'm pretty sure it was Mr. Georges, Jim Georges Sr., was taking some stuff to the dump, and he saw something glinting in the sun far away and wondered what it was. He went over and took a look and saw these picture frames, and when he got closer and checked them out, he realized that they were all of the pictures of the graduating classes from the beginning of Amador up until the point where they were remodeling and rebuilding Amador. These pictures used to all line the hallway in Amador, and they took away the hallway and they threw away the pictures. But he saw my parents and he knew my parents, and he salvaged this and brought it to them. And this is now in my house because I inherited my parents' house in Pleasanton. So this is on the wall in my house.
Both my parents graduated from Amador, and our 2 kids, or 2 children, and my husband. So my husband was my high school sweetheart. So he graduated in '62, and our daughter graduated in '81, and our son graduated in '86.
My grandfather on my mom's side, Joseph Pereira, was the name of the immigrant. He came to the United States looking for work. That work that he got was at the Stanford Ranch down in Palo Alto way back when. Stanford Ranch was about the only employer. And he worked there at the ranch for about 5 years, when he then joined with a partner and went to Newark to work in the dairies. There were a number of dairies in Newark at that time. After saving a little bit of money, he and a friend came to Pleasanton and bought 200 acres of raw land. Hard to believe they could save that much money to go buy some land. But nevertheless, he did. And that went on for a few years as he grew and built his family. He then started to get very involved in Pleasanton, which is how he eventually became a trustee, one of the original trustees of the high school district. But he built a family at 5 kids. He had a working ranch. He came into town most days. My grandfather was always frustrated that nobody wanted to spend money to start the high school district, and there was quite a bit of strain and stress for him to try to make this happen. Didn't just happen, and it wasn't something that had universal appeal.
I'm the youngest of 7. My sister's the oldest, and then 5 boys in the middle. So my sister's Mary, class of 70. Michael, Jimmy, Dennis, Kevin, and Stephen, all Amador graduates.
And I'm a 3rd generation Amador Don. My grandpa up here in this picture, he went there, he was class of 1945. His name was John Wipfli. And then my dad, Charlie Wipfli, was class of 1972. And then I was class of 2013.
I only went to Amador 2 years when the war broke out. And it was different. In our senior year, some of the boys went in the service. And I'm trying to think, I don't think there was more than 38 kids in the class. I think we were all afraid. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Were the Japanese going to bomb us? We were on the coast, you know. And I remember the blackouts. As I said once before, I got caught in the bathtub. We had to turn the lights out, pull the shades down, be quiet. It was war years. And I took, what do you call it? No class. I'm not going to call it no class, but the last period so I could go home and help my folks in the store. And we worked hard.
Yeah.
We worked 6 days a week and 10 hours a day. My mother used to donate blood during the war, and she used to roll bandages. And once in a while, she'd sneak home and make a cake. And she said, "Tonight we're going to take it over to the USO." I said, "Mom, I'm so tired. I don't want to go over there." "Oh, you have to dance with the boys." "Oh, Mom, okay."
We, during the 60s, we were Vietnam War, assassination of President Kennedy. I always get kind of, and a lot of demonstrations against the war. And a lot of the guys were drafted. And so the first person from Pleasanton that was killed in action was Gary Myers. And his mom used to work at the Pleasanton Glass Company, which was in the old train station on Neal. And Gary, we went kindergarten through school together. And so, people think now we do have a lot of things happening in the world, but that turmoil in the 60s was unbelievable. And of course we had the drug revolution too. You had pot, what do we call it? Weed, I guess? I don't know, because I never did it. And then it was the psychedelics. And the music was changing all the time. We started with, Elvis Presley, and then we went on to the Motown, and then, of course, into the funk, which David Garibaldi, who was in my class, was the drummer for Tower of Power, and he also is in the Hall of Fame for percussion.
With me, it was Watergate. That was the big deal back then. Nixon had got reelected, and then all of a sudden it was just kind of this thing that just happened. And it was big, I remember the TV being on and all of the, news stations carrying it. And then the big thing I remember was, President Nixon leaving the White House. He had basically resigned. And then Gerald Ford partying him, that was incredible. I mean, it was just like, it was amazing. That always sticks in my mind. I was big as I was at Amador at that time. And there was a lot of chatter. A lot of our In our classroom, our history classes, we talked about that. It's kind of interesting. It was a good, I guess, teaching subject at that point in time, right?
It's interesting when you're in high school, at least when I was in high school, and I think our friends, our world is so condensed into just what's immediately around us. And so we weren't too aware of some of the big picture, macro world type stuff that was going on, I don't think. We were more worried about, what we're doing on Friday night. So there were a few things that I do remember, though. And one of them I remember is the Iran, thing going on in 1979, late 70s, I think it was. And I remember it because I was part of the Spirit Week leadership group. And we decided that we were going to have uniforms for the leadership, probably about, 8 or 10 of us. And so we got Mickey Mouse shirts with Mickey Mouse on it, saying, "Hey, Iran." And then Mickey was flipping the bird, right? I don't think you can get away with that probably now, but that sort of brought it into focus, this whole Iran thing, because we wanted to use it for Spirit.
Well, when we started high school, George W. Bush was the president, and he ran against Bill Clinton, and Clinton was elected that November of our freshman year. And then Clinton was elected again in 1996, and he ran against Bob Dole. So during that period of time, the Gulf War was going on. The Berlin Wall had come down in 1989, so the Cold War was over. I remember that President Nixon died while we were in school, and over the loudspeaker, they asked everyone to stand up and observe a moment of silence for President Nixon, which was a little bit unusual, I thought. Tech was kind of getting into style. There were some Mac computers, and we had floppy disks that we would carry around that would have information on it for us. And it wasn't until senior year that we could search online for information, and even then it was nothing like it is today, certainly. In 1994, that's when the O.J. Simpson trial was going on, and there was the Bronco chase that happened down in LA, so that was big. And in 93, the World Trade Center bombing happened, and that's when 6 people were killed. And I think something that's worth noting is that Columbine happened in 1999. So we were growing up and we were in high school during a time when we didn't have worries as much about school shootings and about safety at school. So we had a lot more freedom than kids do now. In Pleasanton, some of the big stuff is there was a lot of controversy about building houses on the ridge. From a science perspective, Dolly the sheep was cloned in '96. That was a big deal. AOL started to kind of get big, and so people would have AOL that they could see a little bit of news and they could message with each other, but again, nothing like it is today. We had dial-up internet, and most of us didn't really get email until we went to college. So for us, everything was still pretty much analog. There was Prodigy, which was a service that it was mostly like chat rooms, and to think about it now, it's terrifying because we were kids going into these random chat rooms, and it would show up that we were like Miss California, and we were chatting with random people. They could have been 30-year-old across the country, but it's just so different than it is today.
One of the big things that really affected the school life was during my senior year, Columbine happened. And that was, nobody knew quite how to address it. The students, the teachers, the school itself, everything was just kind of confusing. And
well, it's funny, back in 2016, there was the Ebola virus that was a short stint, I believe in the fall semester. And then obviously a major one was coronavirus, which stopped all of my senior year, starting on March 13th, 2020. And then we didn't have school for the rest of the 2 months. So we skipped a ball and other significant events during the senior year for high schoolers. It was pretty disappointing not having a graduation, and to this day I'm a senior in college and I still have not had an in-person graduation. Celebrated at home with my family, and we had a nice dinner and just watched my graduation online.
It was pretty odd. I remember the week before we were all sent home, I was sitting at my math table group and everyone was talking about what they were gonna have to do like the next week during school and what they were looking forward to for the weekend. And then we just never came back. So I didn't see those classmates again, which was kind of interesting because they were all older than me. But yeah, after my freshman year, I had sophomore year entirely online, which was kind of a difficult experience because I think it was harder for me to learn virtually rather than in person.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely difficult to make new friends because I think there was not really, people didn't know how to like use the breakout rooms. That didn't really function well as like a place to meet new people. But it was definitely easier to keep in touch with old friends because obviously we've got like text messages and other ways of communication, email, Google Chat, all those things help stay in touch.
But I remember the homemaking classroom was off to the side, and it was like two parts. One part had little kitchens in it where we learned how to cook, and then the other part was for sewing. And Miss Nugent taught homemaking, and she was a nice lady. And fortunately for me, I had learned how to cook. I was following my mother around the kitchen all the time, and my grandmother's, and I'd watch and I'd ask questions. And so by the time I was about 10 years old, I could cook. I took homemaking, and we were doing cooking, and I was in this kitchen, and the little kitchens had countertops and sinks and stoves and ovens, and I don't remember if there were refrigerators. There may have just been one big refrigerator. I don't remember. But it was this little square, and there was a table and chairs in the middle, 4 chairs in the middle. And I was in a kitchen with 3 other girls that didn't have a clue. They couldn't even boil water. And so Miss Nugent would do her demonstration, and then she'd give us these little recipes, and we were supposed to cook what she had shown us. And so I was telling them what to do. I was showing them what to do. I was doing most of the cooking. And I think Miss Nugent decided I was just a star pupil, just because I could cook. But so that was good, and she was always praising me. Oh, you're doing such a good job. This is wonderful. And then second semester we went into sewing, and I was a complete mess up with sewing. I hated it. I was afraid of the sewing machine. I was afraid it would stitch my fingers together, and I couldn't sew a straight line. I would get things all messed up, and then I'd say, Miss Nugent, could you help me with this? And she'd say, yes, dear. And she'd come over and take it all apart and re-stitch it for me. And then I'd go a little bit, and then I'd mess it up. Miss Nugent, can you help me? And so really most of my sewing was done by Miss Nugent because she thought I was a good student. And I wasn't a good sewer at all. But fortunately, we started with cooking. So
if you look at the old yearbooks, you will see the facade, the old building. So if you went into that hallway and you looked at the building from the outside, on the left side were the couple of offices, and the main attendance and stuff was on the double doors that they show. And then you go down a big hallway. Well, we thought it was big. And so if you went into the main doors and you went straight across, you opened the doors to the theater. And that theater is still there. It will be demolished also. But then you go right, and you could go up some stairs, and there were 2 classrooms upstairs, and that's where the Spanish class was. And so, and then down the way was history with Mr. Swift. You had art at the very end. You had Mrs. Barden, who did English and French. and then you had a couple more, and then you'd go down the breezeway. And if you went down there, there was girls' bathrooms, and then Mrs. Caparuso used to have like a snack bar kind of thing there, and that's where you got your lunch. And so it was Mrs. Clucker and Mrs. Caparuso.
The campus I was, 4'11" and 13 years old, 14 years old. It was extremely intimidating coming on the campus, especially since I thought I wanted to play sports. I wanted to go out for football. My mother was against it because she thought I'd get hurt, and my dad said, "Don't worry about it. He's too small. He'll never make it." So it turns out I did make the freshman team. Coach Wipfli had seen me playing flag football. Long story short, he puts his arm around me and says, "How'd you like to be a quarterback?" And of course, he said, the next day, I really didn't have a choice. And the next day, Coach Wood puts me in at the quarterback, and so that was my first experience with quarterbacking. And then my JV year, I played quarterback, and my junior and senior years played quarterback.
We started the training before school starts. So 2 weeks before school opened, we were staying somewhere else, but we would go to the football field twice a day. My first day, I forget the name, there was a farm. Everything from Black Avenue out was just farms. And it wasn't the Thompson farm, it was another farm. Anyway, the kid had spread irrigation pipe at dawn, finished, and rode a horse to practice, and we had a hitching rail. And he tied his horse up, and my brother was 14 months younger than me, so he was a sophomore. And it was, we just looked at each other like, and then I remember after the first practice, my brother and I were in the shower, showering off all the sweat because it was hot. And two guys started coming in, and I told my brother, because when I was from San Leandro, if you were new, you were going to get beat up, just because. And I told my brother, I said, okay, here they come. I'll take the big guy on the right, you take the guy on the left. And we were ready, and it was Paul Line and Dave Kurth, who had a furniture store in the old buildings here. And they got close, and I'm ready, and they go, "Hi, Paul Line." And I looked at my brother, and we still didn't know if it was a setup, but that's the way it was. And from then on, we were just part of the Pleasanton family of athletes.
I lived across the street from the high school, so it was not unusual for us to go there and just walk around the school even before we were in high school. And since I had an older sister that was going there, we did attend a lot of the football games and things. So when I started high school, I really knew my way around. The band room, however, we had to keep our instruments down in the basement underneath the stage and then walk up to the stage, and that's where we had band until, I don't know if it was my junior or my senior year where we actually moved into the band room. I spent a lot of time in the swimming pool as a child, taking swimming lessons at the high school. So I was there all summer long, swimming in the pool.
And was that before you were a Amador High School student?
It was when I was in grade school, middle school, and on. I loved to swim.
And was that the public pool at the time?
Yes. Yes, it was. I think we had to pay 25 cents to get in or something like that, and they sold us candy, and all of our friends were there, and you had the big diving board and the little diving board, and it was just a fun time to spend at the pool swimming.
The campus there are certain elements of it that are still there today, some of the buildings, but a lot of it's different. when I went there, someone told me that Amador was built and designed by the same guy who built our house on 2nd Street. So I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. Go check that out. Of course, I couldn't tell too many similarities, but it was just a cool thing. You know, I was pretty confident as a freshman, but still, there was one place, this is what I remember probably most, is one thing you didn't do is you didn't go down the senior hallway. If you went down the senior hallway, you were going to get worked over, talked to, you weren't going to have a good day. So we stayed away from the senior hall until we were seniors, and that was something we learned very early on.
So, coming from Harvest Park, it seemed big. It was very open. Harvest Park had more buildings that were in a circle, so it was kind of a circular campus, whereas Amador just seemed a lot larger. One big difference between then and now is the campus wasn't fenced in, and we had open lunch. In fact, our year was the last year that we could go off campus for lunch. And the science buildings were being built, so we had some portables that were brought in that unfortunately are still there today. We had lockers, and we had PE lockers. And now at Amador, you have a PE locker, but that's it. So having a locker was pretty cool because we had to decorate our locker and put a mirror in it and meet our friends at our locker. The campus, the population on the campus was like half the size that it is today. And so you knew more people than kids know now. And that also meant that the parking lot, it was very easy to get parking, whereas now you have to have a permit. The tennis courts actually were where the parking lot is now. So the tennis courts ended up being relocated further back in the campus to make more room for parking and all the Amador kids that are fortunate enough to have a car right when they get their license.
My first impression was how long do we have to get from class to class, because it was a big campus, and just knowing I had one in the Q building and then one on the other side for biology by the train tracks over there, and I was just worried that I wouldn't have enough time at first because it was a very big campus. I also remember the 2 quad areas, how there was just a lot of outdoor area under the trees, a lot of shade and tables, and I was just looking forward to it.
I was excited to start at Amador. As I said before, I have 4 sisters that went to Amador before me. I felt a little bit more comforted because I already had one sister that was attending Amador at the same time as when I started. And in regards to special buildings or locations on campus, for freshmen, it was the freshman tree. I mean, that's where we all hung out. Located right next to the library. It's a large tree right in the front, with a bunch of tables out front. We basically migrated from spot to spot as you'd go up the ranks, essentially, of high school. So yeah, start with the freshman tree, and then join the rest of the classmen, and then you ended up closest to the cafeteria by the time you were a senior.
To take certain things, math and history, yes, and English, and I think I took a sewing class. I was not very great at that, but because I was in 4-H club, you know, and my mother was a leader in 4-H, and you know, we just did what we supposed to do, and then everything changed when the war came, and as I say, I think I was in my junior year, and I did graduate. There wasn't as many as there was in the class because several did go in the service. I remember one who went in the Merchant Marine, and we just worked hard.
I loved English. That was always my favorite thing. That was my very favorite thing. And I hated math. And Mrs. Varden made a big difference for me because she was my advisor. And it was getting toward the end of school. It was either my senior year or maybe my junior year, but probably my senior year because I was running out of time to take chemistry. I had kept putting off chemistry because I knew I wouldn't like it. I knew I wouldn't be good at it. And so we were like getting down to the wire, And Mrs. Varden wanted me in her special English class, and she wanted me to take a third year of Spanish with Mr. Athenauer. And so she waived chemistry for me, which made me really happy because that saved my grade point average. But I realized later, after I thought about it, you know, and I was more mature, I realized that she was teaching to my strengths, not my weaknesses, because I think she realized I would never do anything with chemistry, but I would do something with languages. And so she wanted me to have that teaching and that experience because it was what was going to matter to me. And I think not all teachers would think that way, but she did, and I appreciate that.
Coach Anger, Don Anger, coach tennis, was fresh from San Jose State, a young teacher. I didn't realize anything about age, but he knew that I trained hard. He knew that things were tough, and sometimes I had him after lunch, so my mother would make a bag lunch with 2 sandwiches and this and that and everything. I'd eat it, and then all of a sudden I'm ready for a nap. And sometimes he would come up and he'd say, "We're gonna put on a movie so you can put your head down." And I would get to nap while a movie was on that really wasn't critical to the class. Tom Lionvale was the track coach. He was from San Jose State, had a world record in the 400 relay. And he was like an early hippie. Everything was laissez-faire. He just, whatever was happening, he just accepted it. We would have track parties. He and his wife would have everybody for barbecues regularly. So that, you know, and he was the cross-country coach, so I didn't know cross-country guys, but you got to know them at these barbecues. And somebody had a birthday party, he'd have us all over, and there's a big birthday cake. And it's just better than you could imagine. There was one other teacher that came between my junior and senior year, and his name was Jerome Jennings. And Mr. Jennings was, I don't know, 6'6". He played pro football for the Pittsburgh Steelers and threw the discus in college. So I didn't have him for biology, which was his subject, but obviously if you're practicing for months and months, he volunteered his time to coach.
All of us would probably agree that Mr. Campana was one of our favorite teachers, without a doubt. It was always a fun time in band, whether we were at practice, in the band room, or on the football field, or in the street marching. We always had a good time. Other teachers, I had a couple of math teachers that I liked. Mrs. Smith, Nora Smith, was a great geometry teacher for me. I had lived in the Jensen track neighborhood where Paul has mentioned that there are a number of teachers living there, so we knew the teachers. I babysat for teachers, Pete Moore, and then other teachers that I liked. I really liked Mr. Athenauer. Spanish was not my favorite subject, but I really liked Mr. Athenauer and went on to kind of stay in touch with him for years afterwards. So, and I always liked my PE teacher, Mrs. Nagel.
Well, one of my favorites will always be Jay Rissa, who's the wrestling coach. I was on the wrestling team my sophomore, junior, and senior year. Lettered in wrestling. I was 175 pounds in those days, and he was a great inspiration for me.
Yeah, to go back, I just think about all the friends that were teachers that my parents, both my parents taught. And so we, not only did I get to see them in school and be in that classroom with them, they were at the house, and so you kind of got to know them. And there was special friendship because, my dad was unique with that because he got along with pretty much everybody, whether it was the football coach, because they had to, that was their football field. And, obviously him and Jerry Wipfli were real good friends. Jim Anglesby, those guys were just solid people. But my teachers in general, they all were really good. We were spoiled. I mean, there's some that I had that were probably better than others, but Coach Don Underwood, who I played basketball for, and Mr. Mohat, just great people. They taught me a lot of things about just not only subject matter, about life and things. And so to this day, I'm still good friends with Don Underwood. We get together usually once a month and have breakfast. And we try to pull in other people from the community, but that was a special time. Very, very fortunate. But I got to see all of that growing up. So those teachers, when I had them, I pretty much knew they were who they were. But it was just when I think about it, we're very, very fortunate to live in Pleasanton, that community, because everybody knew everybody, right? And we all took care of each other. It goes back to what Tony's talked about. There was this feel about trying to get better and help everybody and support each other. And that's just something that I miss. I just really miss that. I miss my parents because of that.
Tony Bright and Mr. Del Tredici both really inspired and encouraged me to keep writing and take it to new levels and use what I was learning from different voices in San Francisco and interject it into my writing. I loved science, so I loved Bill Walker, Mr. Walker. And his son, actually, Jeff, was one of the ones that showed up at my house that first day that I moved there. So, yeah, I think, and Skip Mohat was an absolute favorite also. And in fact, when I showed up, I had him for senior year civics, and when I showed up, I had it in the fall, so I had my cheerleading uniform on because we always wore our uniforms as contact points for new students, so they'd know somebody they could ask questions to get to their classes. So I showed up in my uniform first day of class, and Mr. Mohat gave me kind of this once-over and shook his head, had this sour look on his face, and I asked him, "What's that all about?" I was just forlorn. I couldn't believe he gave me that look. And he said, "My experience with cheerleaders are that they talk too much, they don't pay attention, and they don't do well in my class." And I said, "Well, I'm here to prove you wrong." And I aced his class. And we became very good friends as a result.
Favorite subjects, I would say I wasn't the A student guy, but I did participate in a lot of classes, but my probably favorites were English. I liked English classes, a little bit of history, and I loved leadership. We had a leadership class that was led by Skip Mohat. And Skip was fantastic in that role. He gave us some leeway to do our thing, but he also made sure that we learned leadership skills, and part of that was putting us in leadership situations to things like Spirit Week, or other things around campus, government, those types of situations, and we learned how to lead, and that's something that I was able certainly to carry forward with me from Amador, and also just being around Skip, he had a lot of wisdom, a lot of dry humor, and just a good guy to be around and learn from.
But absolutely, Senior Athenauer, he was. I think even then you knew he was Mr. Pleasanton. There was just something special about being in Senior Athenauer's class, and he would. So I think my name, Kathleen, was already taken in class because you'd have a Spanish name. So my name was Rosa, Kathleen Rose. So we would walk around campus, "Hola, Rosa." I think years passed, and I see him in Pleasanton. "Hello, Senior Athenauer." "Hola, Rosa." But absolutely, he's my favorite. But another one, English, Mrs. Marks. She was an English teacher, and she was so into all the classics, and we would read out loud. And again, we would kind of goof off a little bit. She was awesome. She put up with a lot of shenanigans.
I did comp civics, so the We the People program, and that is all consuming. And so we spent every day after school together studying, and we had our note cards and we had our book open, and that was a big deal. I definitely think that the classes that we had, you know, English with Mr. Ogden and Spanish with Mrs. Charnow or Spanish with Mr. Aguiar, definitely prepared us for college and prepared us for life. And everyone that I've talked to, all of my friends feel like Amador got us ready for the rest of our life. We read Shakespeare every year. One of the favorite teachers, and he ended up being our class speaker at baccalaureate, was Mr. Teal, and he was a biology teacher. And he championed creek cleanups. And so he would take his class down to the creek right by Amador to clean up the creek. And he was so engaging. There was no internet, right? Like teachers, they taught from their heart and in person, and you had like that human connection, and the creek cleanups were transformative for so many students. My friend Olivia San Wong, that really impacted her, and that caused her to have this passion for the environment and for parks and for, you know, taking care of our environment. And that was Mr. Teal. He was amazing. A lot of people would say similar comments about Mr. Mohat. Mr. Mohat was the civics teacher, and he also was the winningest basketball coach in Amador's history. He's a legend, and the large gym is named after him. And he was tough. He was very, very tough. But most kids, anyway, respected him for that. And he believed that an obstacle is nothing more than a challenge, and a challenge is nothing more than an opportunity. And that goes through my head many times every week whenever something seems rough. He believed in the 4 P's, which were pride, passion, perspicacity, which means being able to apply your knowledge appropriately, and personality. And anyone that interacted with him, whether you liked him or not, like you remember Mr. Mohat.
I will say one thing about my least favorite though. PE is important. And most of the time, PE was fine. But my sophomore year, I had it second period, and we happened to take swimming in the middle of winter. That was unbearably cold because we had to bring our swimsuits, change into them, and the swimsuits never dried out between overnight. So they would already be cold. Then you would have just one little towel, which itself wouldn't even be dry. We'd go out, and then they would have to, you know, take attendance, talk to us a little bit, and meanwhile we're sitting out there just bare, just freezing cold, just let us get in the pool, let us get in the pool, let us get in the pool. And then we'd get in and it was warm, and that was nice. Then we'd have to get out. We'd dry ourselves off as best we can, put on our regular clothes, and shiver our way to our next class. That was terrible.
John, he was my English teacher. He always made class fun and worth going to. I just loved going to his class. I think I had him twice, and then, as I mentioned, Senora AOA for Spanish. She was awesome, because I originally met her in summer school for Spanish too, because it didn't go too well freshman year. And then I ended up being in her class again the next year, my junior year, my sophomore year, took Spanish 2 again with her. And after that, she didn't think I was ready to go to Spanish 3, so she said, hey, how about you be my TA for Spanish 1 and 2, and you could just practice what you know. Remember how everybody just wanted you to succeed. If you were struggling to understand, they were just always willing to help you. And at times it came off as, I thought that maybe I wasn't as smart as everybody else, but they just wanted to push me, and they knew I had it in me, and just maybe I was slacking off on homework, so they just wanted to see everybody live up to their capabilities. So that really stuck with me, and they were all just super helpful with everything.
I think Amador prepared me really well because I took rigorous classes, so I feel like I'm prepared for college, which is my next step. So I'll be attending UC San Diego in the fall for environmental systems, which is my planned major. So one of my favorite classes was AP Human Geography because that was something that exposed me to the interdisciplinary nature, I guess, of kind of combined geography and politics and environmental science and urban planning. So I really enjoyed that class. And a project we got to do was like redesign Dublin, like look at the layout of Dublin and kind of see how urban planning works in the context of everything else that goes on in a city. So that was one of my favorite projects. I also really enjoyed like my human body systems class, where we got to look at these mannequins and really get hands-on experience. I also loved my AP government class. That was one of my favorites as well.
They had projectors, the old-fashioned kind of projectors, where with the spools, you know, and the film had little holes on the side that had to fit in the sprockets or whatever, and then the reels would go around. I remember sometimes we'd have movies, but mostly it was just, well, books, of course. You know, we would read chapters in books. That was homework a lot of times, was reading something. And sometimes we'd have exercises to do at home, little math problems or English problems. My favorite thing in English was getting a sentence or a paragraph that had mistakes in it, and we were supposed to find the mistakes and fix the mistakes. That was my favorite thing. I just loved that. In Spanish class I did, because Mr. Affenauer gave us homework every single night. And it was usually like about an hour or so of homework. And I'd say I had maybe 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours of homework every night.
Didn't have anything except the textbooks. And you thought it was big time when a teacher brought in something extra, like posters, or they varied a little bit from, you know, whatever was happening. It was history. I loved history, but history was boring with the the textbooks they had, because those textbooks had to be approved by the state, and there was very little information. Very little, and it wasn't updated at all. So English, it was better because we had a lot more books from, you know, you could bring in your own books, you know, literature, but the library was also there and you could, you know, bring, but nothing controversial.
And everything we did was in a book.
Yeah.
There was no electronics, no internet, no anything like that. You go to the library, you check out books, you look at encyclopedias, you do all of it old school. And when you went to school, you carried a stack of books with you in your arms because we didn't have backpacks. We had lockers. So as soon as you get to school, you go to the locker and you put everything in the locker. But yeah, everything was by book and pencil. And I don't even remember having a calculator. Or a slide. I mean, I had a slide rule, but I don't know how to use it. Yeah, everything was on paper and pencil.
We're not allowed a calculator. You did it longhand, and you had the slide rule. And, you know, it was like, I don't understand this. But no, absolutely not. And that calculators, the little ones, the Texas Instruments, started coming in, and Mr. Jacobson said, if you use that, you get an F on your paper. You learn how to do it the long way, or you don't learn to do it at all.
A lot of homework, and it was a little hard managing my activities at the same time as a cheerleader. It sounds like it was all fluff, but you couldn't if you couldn't maintain your grades, you couldn't be a cheerleader, so you had to have better than a C average. And we had a lot of practices. There were a lot of routines to learn, and
We had to choreograph the routines ourselves, and so there's an entire squad that has to learn them, and you don't learn them overnight. They're sometimes long and involved, and so it took a lot of practice after school, which is normally when I would go straight home and do my homework. And we practiced on the weekends also, it wasn't just after school. It was like being committed to a sport. It's not, cheerleading then wasn't quite as involved as it is today with all the stunts, but some of us were also gymnasts. I was a gymnast, so we put in as many stunts as we could.
I thought the coolest thing we had was these overhead projectors where the teachers could write on them and, you know, it would project up onto the screen. You know, there was obviously video, VHS. It was kind of like they could put video in and it would go onto a TV, like a, you know, monitor, and that was kind of cool. Don Underwood was notorious for always showing video, especially in my Latin American studies class that I took from him. But I remember those were kind of the technology things that were changing, like in the mid-'70s. To that point, but chalkboards, you know, all of my math classes I took, they used chalkboards, I mean, and we did, right, we had books, a lot of workbooks too, more paper, so sometimes it wasn't as heavy. But again, the best thing is that I always used to have nightmares about starting the new school year and forgetting what my locker combination was, because over that period of time, because they didn't give you a new locker, you kept that locker all the way through the time, if you wanted to try and trade up or whatever, but that was a tough thing to do. So that was always my big nightmare, waking up with, I can't remember my combination.
Chalkboards, overhead projectors, VCRs, computers were rarely used for teaching, which I personally think was great. I think that we've lost a lot of that human interaction and connection now. There were a few computer labs, so there was like an English computer lab and there was a math computer lab, but teachers had to reserve time in those computer labs. The library had a few computers that you could use for like reference, but certainly we didn't have devices or, you know, smartphones or anything like that. So that was a lot different. And we had no Google. So our biggest study aid was like Cliff Notes, and that was a little book that summarized, you know, Shakespeare. It summarized, you know, some literature that we needed to read. You still had to, technically, you still had to do the work. But the Cliff Notes did help you. We had textbooks, everything was paper. You know, some of our essays, we could go to the computer lab and type them up. And some people had computers at home with a dot matrix printer, which our family had. And so we would type some things. But for the most part, we had binders and notebooks and textbooks. I loved note cards. I'm still a proponent of like actual note cards. Kids now use these electronic note cards, and I just don't think it's the same. So now we're all digital, but back then, you know, we would do everything on paper. And if really the best kind of forbidden study aid is using the notes from a friend of yours who took the class the year before you, or several years before you. But the teachers were really good at spotting plagiarism. They could tell if you were cheating. Now I just think that's so much more challenging, certainly. But yeah, I was kind of a goody two-shoes, so I wouldn't have used any prohibited study aids anyway. We had TI calculators, Texas Instruments calculators, and shockingly, like 30 years later, the kids are still using the TI-84, TI-83 calculators. So, and they look so similar. So that's something that has stayed the same, which I think is pretty cool.
Case, CP study classrooms. They were experimenting between the difference between lecture style with all the students facing the teacher and they just talk, and CP. CP stood for college preparatory. I believe the idea was that students will learn much more if they're learning from each other. So instead of all the students facing in one direction, they were all grouped in little groups of 4.
At home, especially if you were stuck on something, you would use Google or you use that to message your friends or something. The back of the math textbook would always have the odd answers, so we used that. Calculators were also big. I remember when we had to get, I think it was the T84 calculator, but yeah, we had to get some of those to do all the sine, cosine, tangent, all that stuff. phones back in that day were definitely forbidden. It was just right when every kid started having a cell phone. They became iPhones and smartphones, so you could easily get the test answers and all that on your phone. So those were definitely forbidden. They were pretty strict about them out in the quad area and stuff like that too, but we got away with, as long as it wasn't in the classroom, we were allowed to use them.
Freshman year, it was a lot of whiteboards. And then when we went online, it was like screen sharing and slideshows that were sent out through Google Classroom. Google Classroom is a huge part of high school. And then towards my senior year, I think it was that they put in these like smart boards for the teachers where they could use these pens to write on the smart board and then they could like erase it, but it was digital. It's kind of hard to explain, but I think towards my senior year, again, this ChatGPT, this AI website type of thing came out in my senior year, and it started being a problem for the classes where written assignments were more common. So I know a lot of English teachers were worried about kids like putting the prompt into the AI thing and then using that to generate their work. So what happened was that my English teacher, she like switched over to paper only. So we would handwrite our essays for a little bit or handwrite the worksheets. So that's something new that came out.
Rock and roll was just kind of getting started. Rhythm and blues was popular. Clothes. I remember I had these little white suede shoes, and I had this thing called a bunny bag, and it had white powder in it, and you would bang the powder on your suede shoes to make them look white again. I remember that. And straight skirts were big. My mother had a pattern that used 1 yard of fabric to make a straight skirt for me. So she made a lot of my skirts. In fact, her uncle had a factory that made clothes for Skarratt, if you remember Skarratt. And so when her aunt and uncle would come out to visit us, he would bring us remnants from the factory. And they'd usually be like a yard. And so I had all these skirts that were Skarratt, lovely plaid wool, Skarratt looking skirts, but they were remnants that my mother used to make skirts for me. So that was kind of fun.
So we did have a dress code, and so I can remember our freshman orientation, and right then was white pleated skirts, and then Angora sweaters, and socks that matched your sweater, and white buck shoes. And it was, the first part of school, everybody wanted to wear their first new outfit. And some of the girls had started putting on this tanning lotion, and it turned orange. And you were so hot because you had these sweaters on, and it was hot at the very beginning of school. Maybe in the morning it was cool and there was tule fog, but by the time it was noon, you were just sweating. It's when skirts started getting shorter, and we had a dean of girls, and she would measure your skirt. And soon, first of all, you went out to catch the bus, and your skirt was where it should be. Then as soon as you got on the bus, you rolled up your waist, and so you were in. And as soon as the teacher would come, you'd roll it back down because she was measuring. And if it didn't, if it wasn't right, you were sent home. There was no question. You were sent home.
One of the things that was talked about in Pleasanton was the new people. And my father, that's how we got here. He made enough money to move out of San Leandro. And he bought my brother and I brand new Camaros. So that was like, can you believe that? Which today you can hardly believe. But there were 3 policemen, and I was driving down Main Street with my 8-track tape playing loud. The Officer Ragone pulled over and blocked me, and I stopped, and he leaned out the window and he goes, "Turn that goddamn thing down." Wilson, he knew my name. I had not, but he knew. And I mean, but that's all it was, hey, that's not good. Turn that thing down. And you did it. They were great cops.
Girls had to wear dresses, and they couldn't be more than so many inches above your knee. And we were put in the gym, and the teachers would take a yardstick, and we would be on our knees, and they would measure. And we're all unzipping our skirts and pulling them down so that we can meet that 7-inch whatever it is. And if you couldn't, you were sent home to change your clothes. Never could we wear anything other than dresses until I think towards the end of my senior year, we could wear like pantsuits, like a polyester matching pants and shirt.
On special days.
On special days.
Not just regular classes.
Yeah, the only time we could wear a short dress is if we were wearing something like this and we had our little shorts underneath it. But no, we were forced into that.
Okay, and what did the boys wear to school?
Anything they wanted.
No, well, yeah, we could, but
No shorts.
no shorts.
Yeah.
Usually, you know, your Levi jeans and black Converse, low cut,
Chuck Taylors. Yeah.
white socks, J.C. Penney's sports shirt. That was the dress that everybody wore.
Well, until our first Earth Day, we were required to wear dresses, skirts. The girls had to wear dresses that came like no more than, I think it was an inch above the knee. And then after Earth Day, when we were allowed now to wear pants, I think it started out where we were only allowed to wear pants on Fridays, and then eventually we were able to wear pants later. And once we were able to wear pants, boy, the shorts came out, and then girls still were wearing skirts, but instead of them being here, they were here. And then we had hot pants that were just a few inches below our hips, and hip huggers. Our shorts got shorter and our pants got lower. So it was kind of a time of revolt where girls were saying, okay, it's been a long time that the boys got to wear whatever they wanted. Now it's time that we're going to set the stage.
School dances were a big deal, and a lot of times we have live bands, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of cool, you know, that we would go to the dances. And I remember everybody couldn't wait for Stairway to Heaven. That was a big slow song, right? And everybody liked that. To that part. And then Peter Frampton was big in the mid-70s, and so he was kind of coming in Frampton Comes Alive. So, but I remember, you know, the school dances and especially the live bands, where everything now is it's DJ or this or that. So don't see that a whole lot anymore. And, you know, the live music was really kind of good. The top 40, as they call it.
So definitely one song with basketball we listened to on repeat was Sister Sledge, We Are Family. That was our song. Michael Jackson's Thriller album. And I remember going to Anna's again because they had MTV, and we watched the Thriller video on MTV. Like, that was super cool to see, like, a music video. That was like, I think it might have been one of the first music videos to ever come out. So that was in music. Madonna was starting. I think Madonna started more in the mid-'80s. Senior year also, we listened to Men at Work. And we all had the cassette in our cars. You know, having a cassette player in your car was a really big deal.
Like, it was very safe in Pleasanton. We had plenty of different activities we could do. We had the Galaxy movie theater. We could go see the movies, and kids would hang out like at the Blockbuster, where you rent videotapes, or DVDs, and there was a TCBY frozen yogurt next to it, and that was where we would hang out. We would hang out at Denny's or Lions, and it just kind of felt like things were pretty chill. That is when people kind of started identifying with certain styles. And so some kids were into like grunge, some were into preppy, and some were more into like punk. But overalls were in, like slip dresses with little t-shirts under were in, chain belts, scrunchies were really popular, high top, the Reebok high top sneakers, which is funny to see some of this come back because scrunchies were in like 5 years ago too.
I'll say this, designer jeans were in. Yeah, I definitely haven't put those on for a long time, but that was the trend back then. Also, yeah, it was a little before I went, but Ed Hardy, you'd still see a couple more of those shirts around. And then my friends and I, we like to wear Pink Dolphin, the company Pink Dolphin. So that was a good one that we wore during high school. Looking back, you kind of laugh now, but that was definitely the style then.
I joined the band and I played the clarinet, and Mr. Tripp was our instructor, and we paraded in the Alameda County Fair and the Livermore Rodeo and wherever. The big thing was we went to Treasure Island one time to parade, and that was very exciting. Oh yes, all the girls had to be in the pep squad. We wore gold blouses and we wore purple corduroy skirts. And we always sang a little song, "We're Dons from Amador High." That's enough of that. And you hold that for me. I'll hold this up so you can see this was the sweatshirt.
It was pretty much, on Friday night when the football game was going on, kids were cruising the main, and you turn around at Gay 90s, and you didn't dare do anything out of the ordinary because your parents were called. It was as simple as that. Everybody went to the football games. Everybody went to the basketball games. Some did baseball. Some did track. And it was just, those were our activities. Summertime was there, they didn't have summer school then because a lot of some of the kids worked in the fields. There were no jobs. You could babysit. That was about it. 50 cents an hour. We didn't have what they have now because we didn't have Title IX. And of course we all wanted that, but you didn't have it. So we had the aquacades, which, everybody did because we all learned to swim at the high school pool with the Red Cross, and that's where we learned to swim. And then, so you learned all those different techniques there. We had that. We had field hockey, and I was a freshman, and I got to play with the seniors because I was kind of an aggressive type person. So, and then we had softball, which Marcia Liddickson was the pitcher, and I was the catcher. And we moved that ball, and we were tough. But basketball was not, it was in the old gym, which they will be tearing down in the near future. Both gyms they will be, and they will put new ones up. That old gym was the same gym that my parents were in. So, not good. But, so basketball was, you had 3 girls on one side of the center and 3 on the other. You were allowed 3 dribbles, and then you had to pass it. And it was awful. It was just awful. But, that's the way it was. And at one point, we all had to have uniforms for PE. Everybody had to play. You all had to take showers. It didn't matter. And then we had these horrible swimsuits that were cotton that the school bought. And you got in the water and they all went drag. So nobody cared for that, and people altered them, and but it just was. It just.
The thing about football was that we never really had enough players. As Amador was kind of the doormat of the league because they were smaller, didn't have a lot of players, and that started to change. It was like a culture shift that was taking place that I really didn't understand at the time, but all of a sudden we were getting kids from Dublin, and so that was giving us more of a talent pool to choose from. But I would say more importantly, the credit for our rise in winning was Coach Wipfli. Coach Wipfli, Coach Inglesby, Coach Woods, Coach Risso, Coach Burks. These guys were responsible for us getting to the levels that we were at. As far as me, my involvement was as a quarterback, and I have to say that Coach Risso was probably the most important guy in my life at that time because he helped me by really teaching me how to throw a pass. I was quick enough, but I couldn't throw a pass, and that was our major change in '66. Yeah, that was the excitement in our city at that time was such that everybody was wondering if we were going to be undefeated, and turns out that we were undefeated in league, and that meant that we were the champs, and that was the first drought that people talk about that was 43 years long, that we never really had a championship football team. We were always getting beaten by Livermore, and that year things changed, and the year after that the team was not only undefeated in league, but they were undefeated with the practice games as well. Well, the letter sweater, it wasn't just for sports, it was also for band. So this guy over here shows that I was in band, and these notes were that my years in band. Actually, I'm missing a note because I was 4 years in the band. And then class of '67, and then these are where you had your varsity playing acknowledgments. So I was on the basketball team for 3 years, so those are the stripes. The stars that you get, there's four of those. Those are for multiple graduating varsity teams. So I was with the baseball team 4 years. I was with the basketball team 3 years, and I was with football 2 years. So that's what all these guys are down here.
In Aquacade, I think for 2 years, where we had to do dance performances underwater and put our legs up in the air, and I've got pictures of that.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I did I was a timer for the swim team. So I liked going to the swim meets, and so Mr. Volpone? No, Mr. Volante.
Chuck Volante.
Yeah, not I don't do that. Yeah, Volante, he let me be a timer. And then I was a letter girl, and so we had practices after school a lot. And we were at the football games and the basketball games, maybe the rallies. So the football games, it prevented me from doing halftime performances, but I was able to pick up and do the parades and the concerts and everything else that the band did. I just didn't do, like cheerleaders, they didn't do the band thing during football season or basketball season because we were busy doing our cheerleading thing.
I became a cheerleader because I was always really interested in sports and athletics. I was a gymnast and a swimmer, and they didn't have gymnastics or swimming at Amador for girls at the time. So a couple other girls and myself, our senior year, actually got Amador's first gymnastics team. We found an advisor, I think her name was Mrs. Kaler, and she agreed to be our coach. And that was one of the only sports I could do, but it wasn't until my senior year. So being a cheerleader got me a little bit closer to athletics, and there were stunts and routines, so it was still exercise and fun, and was spirit. It was being able to be spirited and a part of the school community.
Yeah.
We would all gather in the gym. We'd have our purple and gold paint and big block, butcher block paper, and we'd roll it out, and we'd all just write the players' names and numbers and catchy little, like Annihilate Danza or whatever it is, whatever team we were playing. And then we'd hang them up all over the school and in the gym, and we'd make individual ones for the individual players' lockers. The cheerleaders would have lists so that we'd divide up the team so nobody was forgotten. And we'd get paint all over us and have to clean up the gym floor. Somebody would kick the bucket and spill the paint, and it was fun.
So sophomore year, I went out for the basketball team, and that was, awesome. I don't know why I didn't do it my freshman year. Just kind of getting to know the campus and stuff like that. And so sophomore year, went out for basketball, and I was on the JV team. My jersey. I think I got the jersey because the following year we were getting new jerseys. And playing basketball is awesome. Like, just so many great friends and, competition and camaraderie, and that was super fun. Always went to all the games. Went to all the football games, basketball games, boys games. So playing basketball gets you just, playing sports or whatever you're into, whether it's sports or band or whatever, it just kind of gets you into the feel of the campus life and getting to know other people and stuff like that. So that was sophomore year. That was a really great thing I did. Yes, cue up glory days. That was my senior year. So I think San Ramon was supposed to be probably the best team, and we were a good team. My junior year, we were good. We won league, NCS, all that. And then our coach, Phil Hansen, legendary Pleasanton family, Phil, he didn't get a teaching job in Pleasanton, so he went to Bishop O'Dowd. And so his dad didn't want to leave us because we were so good our junior year, so he wanted to continue that. So his dad, Jack Hansen, who was a legendary coach in his own right at St. Elizabeth, he came and coached us our senior year. And so that was awesome. So this game, it was like a really big game pitting like the two best teams. And I had a good game. Got, my headline and in the paper, and so that was cool. And we went on that year, our senior year, we went on to win 31 games in a row, and then lost the last game in the state semifinals. So yeah, really good memories from that.
So I was very community oriented. So I did a lot of activities at school involving the community and involving politics. I was a member of a club called Junior Statesmen of America. And it was all about being politically involved and debating current topics and current issues. I also did mock trial, and that was, doing a mock trial. So I was a prosecuting attorney, and friends were witnesses, and we had defense attorneys. I was very politically active, and so our freshman year, Barbara Boxer was running for Senate, and I had boxer shorts, and I had the boxer shirt, and I had boxer pins, and I was really into that. And I ultimately ended up going to school in Washington, D.C., and I interned on Capitol Hill and wrote a few speeches that were given on the floor of the House, so that was a very formative time for me in high school, for sure. But a lot of friends had regular jobs. We would certainly, hang out with friends. We would go to the mall. We didn't go downtown as much as kids do now. And let's see, I was in leadership, so I was one of the senior class officers, so all the senior activities I was involved with. And as I said, I did comp civics, and that was such an incredible experience. It's in a congressional hearing style format where you have a unit, you've got a group of like 5 students, and you focus on one element of our government. And so my unit focused on the founding and the writing of the Constitution. And we worked very hard. And Amador got a reputation, which Amador still has, as being, you know, one of the top teams in the country. And so our year, we like to say that we tied for first. We ended up losing by 1 point. We lost by the tiebreaker. But the year before us won the whole thing. They were #1 in the nation. So that was a pretty incredible experience that, again, really shaped me and was one of the reasons why I wanted to go to school in Washington, D.C. I was also the student rep for what is now PPIE, Pleasanton Partnerships in Education. I was on the Youth for a Tobacco-Free California Committee. I was also really involved in Red Ribbon Week. Our class was the first graduating class of DARE, which back then stood for Drug Abuse Resistance Education. And now it's kind of morphed into some other topics as well. But that was something that really impacted me and was important to me.
There were 2 shows every year. The fall show was what Amador wanted to put on, and we had access to the Amador Theater. Oh, I loved it. They would only let us in about a week and a half before the production started, so we'd go in, we'd rehearse. We would already be well rehearsed, and we would have all the props and everything set up, so it was just getting some last rehearsals in, and then getting the techs and the tech run-throughs, and then we would perform. Loved that theater. The springtime was the time for the spring musical that we did jointly with Foothill. And getting in that usually wasn't so hard because that was a, you know, they always needed chorus members.
School extracurricular activities, I really didn't have that many. I was more working as my extracurricular activity. I got the family business that I've been working at since I was probably 12 years old. So I remember as soon as I was a freshman, my cousin went at Amador, and she would give me a ride on days to get to the warehouse. We'd get there about 3:15 and work until 5. And then Saturdays, every Saturday, I'd have to be there at 7 a.m. So no matter how bad my friends wanted to go out on Friday, I'd be semi-responsible and make sure to be home at a good hour, but work was not fun on Saturdays. Of course, our busiest day too, but you got used to it after a while. By my senior year, I had it down.
I had 1 year of baseball and then 3 years of football, and I got my letter in football under Coach Danny Jones. And I'm really appreciative of the Emerald Valley football program to help turn young boys into men and really help show boys, you know, the correct way to do things in life and to work hard and have discipline, which really has helped me a lot in my life even to this day.
Great.
I played defensive end, and my favorite games to play were definitely at the beginning of the season, like playing pigskin. That was definitely my favorite event in general for the whole sport season, any sport. And then obviously everyone likes the foothill indoor game. That was a big deal. And it was also fun going against harder competitions such as De La Salle, and you know, really getting out there and playing against harder teams.
Say my main extracurricular throughout high school was something that I started, Bo Buddies Music. During quarantine, COVID, it started as a way to like connect with other musicians, string musicians, because we kind of lost some of that during online school, as you can imagine. It's hard to be in a music class online. So it started as a way to just meet other strings kids and kind of connect and play for each other. And then it turned into giving free strings lessons for the community. So that was something I worked hard on. We just had an event a couple months ago with the museum on Main. I've got a flyer here from the event, but it was a petting zoo, instrument petting zoo, and we had high school, middle school kids come with their instruments, and then we had the like preschoolers and younger kids come and like learn about the instruments, and it was really fun.
shopping. I went shopping with friends. Sometimes we would take the bus, and that was kind of exciting. I remember the Rohrback twins and I would go shopping, and we would take the bus into Hayward. There was a Capwell store, which was a kind of a department store, and Hayward was the closest town to Pleasanton. There was nothing like that. I mean, there were a couple of little dress shops, but there was nothing like that in Pleasanton. So we would get on the bus, which was kind of mature and exciting, we thought, and we would go to Hayward and we would go shopping, and then we'd come back on the bus. And we did some cruising, but if I didn't have a car, and I lived out in the country, so if I wanted to go cruising, I had to borrow my parents' car, and they were really pretty good about it. They said, you know, if we're not using the car, you can use the car, and they would let me come in and pick up people and go cruising a little bit. And I remember after a few hours of just driving up and down Main Street, I would go to the gas station and I'd buy a gallon of gas, and it was like 25 or 30 cents. And then I'd take the car home with the gas replenished.
Once in a while you would call a girlfriend, but the phone was not a toy. And you were told, and we had a party line, and the kids down the street, they were on our party line, and I'd have to go, Delmar, get off the phone, you know, because somebody was on the phone, and or your parents said, your 5 minutes is up, and that was it. And so, but growing up where we lived on Sycamore, or LSL, my maid of honor, because we were best friends from 6th grade on, she lived around on Happy Valley. So we just walked over there and played. Or we walked over the hill through a couple of fields, through barbed wire, and played for the day. And so you asked what other activities. Big into 4-H. 4-H in Pleasanton was huge. We had, I think, 4 or 5 clubs. And I was in the Abbey Club, and I think I was the first president of the Abbey Club. And so we raised sheep, did sewing, did cooking, and that, I think, was it. So my grandmother did one, my mom did the other, and I forget who taught sheep, but yeah. And we showed at the fair every single year. You put in your sewing projects, and most everybody was in 4-H too, depending on where you lived in town, because they were all broken up according to kind of where you lived.
The team was the number one in terms of my friends, but my friends generally were guys that were growing up in town. And then we started to get some kids from Dublin, and if they were on one of the teams, then of course especially if they were the offensive line, they were definitely going to be my friend. Would probably cruise town a little bit and end up at Gay 90s Pizza Parlor and have some pizza about 12 o'clock in the morning after all the games, after everything was done. And that was really a lot of fun.
Well, my best friend in growing up when I was about 12, I guess, was Jack Haggerty. We both played in the band. I think he was playing an E-flat alto horn. I was playing cornet. And in 6th grade, I got braces. And Chan Henderson said, you know, he needed the sousaphone players had graduated. He needed a sousaphone player. So I said, well, I'll do it. And I talked to Jack and said, well, I'll do it too. So the two of us were the sousaphone section in the Pleasanton Elementary tartan band, marching band. And we went. We were in Boy Scouts together. We're both Catholics, so we went to St. Augustine's Church, and we're still friends to this day. We're Facebook friends. We communicate together, and we both received our Eagle Scout rank our senior year in high school.
My friends were Letty and Noni, and you become instantly friends with all the girls on the cheerleading squad. And most of my time was spent with my cheerleading friends because of the time commitment of practicing. But then we'd also socialize outside of school and get together. We'd ride, as younger girls, we'd ride our bikes to Meadowlark Dairy to get ice cream. And we'd go have breakfast at Dean's Cafe sometimes, and go to Wayside Park and hang out, and we weren't on Game Boys, we weren't on video games, we were outside for the most part playing frisbee in the park. A lot of times the cheerleaders and some of the guys that we were friends with would get together and have big frisbee games, and the guys that played football would bring footballs and they'd be throwing them around, and we all just enjoyed the outdoors. There weren't all the little handheld things that keep kids busy today. We were engaging with each other and playing outside.
I wanted to make sure it wasn't just me here talking about my days at Amador. I want to make sure some of my friends were here with me, and so I guess behind me here is a picture that we took. This was one of the study sessions that we had. These are kind of my guys right here. We did a lot of stuff together at Amador and just in general, around town, and had a lot of fun, got in a little trouble, but some of these are still some of my great friends. And so these are the guys. These are the guys I brought with me when we'd show up to drive by. We wanted to do something. We wanted to go by someone's house, see if they were there, see if they could go off and do whatever it was. We'd use our car horn and do a Syracuse, and that was a signal. That was sort of the bat signal. I'm here. Are you there? Come on out. Let's go do something. So that's kind of the other way I guess that was our text. That was our text. Was the horn? I'm here. That was an early form, I guess, of texting. What did we do? There were things like going, down to Jack in the Box to hang out. That's where you hung out. You cruised a little bit, maybe on Main Street, but you always ended up at Jack in the Box parking lot. Went over to 7-Eleven if you could, to get a big gulp or maybe more. There was, I guess, there just wasn't a lot to do. One of the things we did, and this is looking back on it, probably not a great thing, but because we were so bored, we used to call the cops on ourselves. And so we could, wait for them to show up looking for a group of rambunctious kids and take off running and see if they could catch us. They never did. And so that's how we figured out, we're going to have some fun on a Friday night. We're going to have to make it happen ourselves. And, we did it.
So we could go off campus for lunch, what have you. So my sophomore year is when I got into playing basketball. And so, that was a big part of my social network. But I had 4 friends that they're my besties to this day. Anna Haddad, Franny Sweeney, and Franny's dad, Neil, was my dad's best friend. And then Tracy Spence and Lisa Lovell, that's 5. Tracy ended up moving away our sophomore year. And then the 4 of us still thick as thieves all the way through Amador. And then my sophomore year when I went out for basketball, I made more basketball friends. But for the most part, it was Franny, Lisa, Anna, and I we were the buddies. And when we got our license, I think it started probably when we got our license, we would go off campus to Anna's house in Vintage Hills, and she was probably one of the first people in town that had a video recorder, like a VHS. It might have been Beta actually, and they would video all my children. So we would get out of our like 4th period class, jam to the parking lot, go up to the Haddads, watch half hour of the day before's All My Children, because her mom would record it for us. And then we would have whatever, we would make nachos in her microwave, because they also had a microwave, and melt the cheese, what have you, and then we'd just go back to campus. And so those were like core memories of just, leaving campus and, having fun. We're all in the car, that freedom you get. No parents are driving you. Oh, the big thing, we would pass notes all the time. So we would be, in class and something would happen and we would be writing our note to our friend, and then, we have a 5-minute passing period and we'd pass the note. There's no texting, that was our texting. Senior year, when so that was junior year when she got nominated. So senior year, she was student body president. And so Franny she was in the leadership class, so she had a whole stack of passes to get out of classes because she was student body president. And they were signed by Miss Winter, June Winter. So she had a huge stack. And we would use those pre-signed passes to cut class and go to the donut shop on Main Street. Like, Franny, get some more passes. She's like, you guys, we used them all. I'm like, you can get more, come on, Franny. So here she was student body president, but she's giving us passes on the side. It's like, it was such a different time. And just hanging out at the donut shop. Like, what senior in high school is just hanging out at the donut shop today with their friends? Leaving campus, getting in our cars, leaving campus. Like, not a care in the world. Then we had passes from the student body president to cover us.
For the most part, we do very similar activities to what kids do now. We would go to the mall. Now kids go to the mall, or they go to City Center in San Ramon, or the outlets, but we would go to the mall. We would go watch movies at the Galaxy, like Dumb and Dumber or Ace Ventura. Jim Carrey was really big. And Dave Luno from high school, he does the best Jim Carrey impersonation. Clueless, Jurassic Park. Adam Sandler was really popular with Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore and Wedding Singer. Schindler's List came out, so that was a very powerful movie back then. A Few Good Men, Scent of a Woman. So we would rent movies from Blockbuster and get frozen yogurt, and then we'd all pile into someone's car because kids could drive anyone. We would go to someone's house and hang out and watch movies. There were also billiards places that we would go to where we would just go and play pool. Now, the billiards places are bars, and so you have to be 21 to get in. So that kind of took away one activity that kids now can do. We would come downtown to go to New York Pizza and to the dairy, and there was like a challenge to see if you could at lunch go to New York Pizza, go to the dairy, and get back to school without being tardy. So that was definitely something that was kind of fun. And as I said, we would hang out at Denny's and Lyons. The coffee culture was starting then too. And so the Coffee Roast Express used to be in the old train station. And so we started going to the Coffee Roast Express, and Coffee Beans and Things used to be down here on Main Street, and we kind of started going there. Some kids were into video games. The Nintendo 64 came out, and we would play like Pac-Man at Chuck E. Cheese. Even in high school, like we would go to Chuck E. Cheese. PlayStation came out, and Sonic the Hedgehog kind of started getting popular. And again, I'm just blown away. There were no buses. So now when kids go to senior ball or junior prom or grad night, for example, they're on buses that are paid for by the school. But we just kind of figured out how to get everywhere on our own. Again, because we could all, drive each other. And what's interesting too is because we didn't have devices, we were not immediately available at all times. And so the way we communicated was through a phone call.
Most of my friends were people with different tastes. So yeah, they'd come and see my shows, and they could be wonderfully supportive, but different circles. And I will tell this story. My first day at Amador, which was so tense because it was so new, it was so different, it was so crowded, so intimidating, and At lunch, I couldn't get to the food line. Everything was especially crazy that day, and I just wanted to back off and just like go to the library and just find a corner somewhere. I'm a very introverted person, and that's what felt right to me, or safe. But I ran into a couple friends from Boy Scouts, including one who was an older friend, who was an older guy, and man, they just made me feel so warm and welcome. We just created our own little group. We met at lunch. We hung out. We're still doing Boy Scouts. So just bless them. Bless their hearts, because they really saved me when I really needed it. Another group of friends, just because we loved video games, we loved fantasy and nerd stuff, and we started doing role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, things like that, and I absolutely loved it, and I still do it. I still run role-playing games. I ran one last weekend. Actually, I ran a Dungeons and Dragons game last weekend with one of my friends from high school that I used to game with. So that's a tradition I have held on to for 25 years running. That's so great.
Everything together. I remember a couple of days after school, we'd go to Rock and Jump together. We'd always go to Fiesta Taco together after the Friday football games. We would just do everything together. We'd have sleepovers on weeknights to say we were studying for tests and stuff. We made sure we were always to text each other, Facebook, Messenger, whatever it was then. I think it was just Facebook. Yeah, we would text. Once in a while, you'd ride your bike down to their house and see if they could hang out, but you don't do that anymore.
Maybe getting my diploma from my grandfather. That felt special.
And that was your grandfather who was the trustee?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was the president of the board, so he passed out the diplomas.
There's just no, it's almost indescribable how important Amador was in my life and getting me to do things that I probably would never have done. This amount of satisfaction that my parents were just really proud of the work that I was doing in school, and that I could keep my grades up and still play all the sports. Being able to kind of give back to them was probably the single most important thing in my life, even today.
I guess as far as athletic achievement, it was going to the state championship meet at Berkeley with Coach Linevale and Coach Jennings. And then afterwards, we went to that big fish market for dinner, Stagneros, or no, not Stagneros, Spangers, that's it. And that was a big deal. They took me to dinner after the meet. I placed 8th or 9th in the state. But I mean, it's so close between. I started throwing the discus as a sophomore, and a senior, I'm at the state meet, being honored with my coaches and going to dinner. It was very special. Otherwise, being a lineman, scoring a touchdown was huge, huge. I mean, I got across the line and I just dropped the ball and walked to the sidelines and sat down. There was no high fives in '68. There was none of that. I just was exhausted. I want to go sit down. But it was, linemen don't score touchdowns. So that was a huge memory. And just all the other stuff, whether it's football or track, being a big fish in a small town.
The most memorable day at Amador was in December of '69. The Raiders were in the playoffs. So on Sunday, December 21st, my 18th birthday, I was leading the band as drum major on the field at the Open Coliseum.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome.
I was the drum major. I led the band on the field. And the most terrifying thing I had to do, and the previous drum major, who had been drum major for many years, was Bill Hamilton. What he did was he would start on the 50-yard line, and he would run and then kick his legs out in front of me. And Bill was a little bit taller than me. He was a long distance runner, so he was lean. Well, me, like I said, I was a 175 pounder on the wrestling team, and they actually had to add extra material to my drum major uniform and get me to fit into it. And now the most embarrassing was when I led the band at the Livermore Rodeo Parade. And so this is my very last time to lead the band, and we're heading down First Street to the flagpole, and I was getting pretty good at throwing that baton around. So I was doing my thing, and I tossed it in the air, left my hand, flew over the top of the band, and I had to direct the band to make a right turn where we would be dismissed. So I looked around and I said, "Arnie, give me your trombone." He goes, "No." And I said, "Dean Trissler." I said, "Dean, give me your honey." He's laughing, and so he gives me a horn. I raise his trombone over my head and direct the band to make that right turn. I'm sure Campana was going, "Oh my."
We probably took first place.
I think it's maybe the day I arrived, and these kids that were ironically all freshmen, my same year, showing up, just extending an offer to help unload the van and telling me a little bit about themselves and about school and not to be afraid. And then they agreed to meet me at school that morning, and they did. They showed up in the front of the school, waited for me. I walked to school with Letty and Noni. They walked me there. So when I started that first day, I wasn't alone. It was really special.
I guess it's the thing I brag about the most. So I guess this is the memory. When I was a senior, playing baseball, I think we were about 4 and 15 that year. We weren't great, but we did play Livermore High School when Randy Johnson was pitching there, Hall of Famer, for maybe those who don't know. But great pitcher. He was 6 feet 9 inches in high school, and the guy, brought the heat. And the highlight of my baseball career was hitting a double off of Randy Johnson, getting a few RBIs. So I still talk about that today. That's like I always, if I'm trying to impress someone, I make sure to throw that story in there. So double against Hall of Famer Randy Johnson. Actually, my mom kept the box score from that. I didn't realize that she gave it to me not too long ago, because I told this story. Yeah, sure you did. I was able to produce the box score in the game recap that I said. So, it's legit. It's legit. So that's probably, for better or for worse, my best memory of
I think just all of the senior class events were so fun. Senior ball and homecoming. Our homecoming float senior year was Willy Wonka, and Mrs. Walazuski hosted us, and she lived on a court up in Vintage Hills, and she was so lovely and fun, and obviously very relaxed to have groups of high school seniors hanging out at her house and building this float. The Donnies were really fun, and that was the senior awards ceremony, and that's what these are from, is the Donnies. Senior ball was in San Francisco at the Rincon Center. We went to Waterworld in Concord as a senior event. We had grad night at the Amador gym. Now they go to Las Casitas, but we were at the gym. We had the senior talent show. So I would say all of those senior events were so noteworthy. And again, it was relaxed. It was very relaxed.
Finally beat Foothill in the football game. It had been forever. I had a couple friends on the team, and of course, we were waiting to rush the field. Freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, it didn't happen. But we got a chance senior year. And as soon as we rushed on, I saw the game ball bouncing to me, so I made sure to pick it up, and it was at Fiesta Taco with us that night.
My most treasured memories from Amador was definitely pigskin, the dances that we had, and football season in general was definitely a great time of year for me. In regards to pigskin, it was really cool seeing so many vendors and stuff going on right when the football season is starting, and I'm a huge football fan, so it's a big deal for me. And then in regards to the dances, it was fun to dress formally and have a good time with your friends.
So there's an Amador tradition for seniors where at the beginning of the year, it's called Senior Sunrise, and all the kids go, it's like the day before school or a few days before school, we go to this like little hill place and watch the sunrise. And then towards the end of the year, we go again and watch the sunset. So it's like a really sweet tradition that I really enjoyed.
Be happy. Be grateful. I am very grateful.
Have fun, but be sure you do your homework because that's important. And take the time to recognize that this is kind of a special time, and it's going to go fast, and then it'll be over, and then you'll be moving on to something else. So take some time to look around and appreciate things.
I think it's so important to know your background, to know what made, and people come, they say, oh, we came to Pleasanton because it was so warm and welcoming. But you need to take that yourself forward. You need to be involved. You need to know that what you are doing every day makes a difference. And when we were in school, even sometimes when we got reprimanded, we knew that people cared and they were trying to make you the best person you could possibly be. And now Amador is huge, and I was very lucky to be there when it was small, and I used to think the teachers were old. They weren't. We just thought they were. But they gave us structure, and they made it so you felt that you could achieve anything. But you were also responsible. And I think people need to understand you have a responsibility to yourself and to your community. And your community is the school district. It's your, if you're religious or not, it's that set, but it is your neighborhood, and it is every day. Every day you need to touch someone and make them feel like they belong.
What they got, what they get it, use it, make it work, and pass it on. Pass it on. What, not just the words or whatever, all those experiences, because that worked for me. Experience and pass it on and make it work. And I think passing it on is important too.
Say that life is short. I've certainly learned that in my adult years. Take advantage of school as much as you can. Participate. I participated, but it was kind of out of fear, really. And I was able to kind of conquer that fear by participating in the extracurricular activities and holding myself accountable for grades, even though I was busy.
Participate. Sign up. Explore different stuff. Confucius says, he who does nothing makes no mistakes. If you're kind of interested in something or participating in a club or an activity or an art fair or whatever your talent is, whatever you're interested in, and not even passionate, the passion might develop later, but sign up, see what it's like. Because that's how, I got to know the valedictorians of the people that were like today would have been geeks, but we just intermingled, and there's a wealth in that, other than just being the jock and the this and the that. You know, we didn't have a lot of that, a little bit, but when I look at who I'm friends with on Facebook, they weren't on my teams. They weren't even athletes, many of them. I remember in one class, I forget which class, but the girl, she married the guy and they owned a pharmacy up on First Street. And she would help me. She'd tutor me and stuff. And she was a year younger, but she was good at it, and she volunteered to help me with my struggles in a particular subject. Just because.
The saying, do what you love what you do.
Yeah.
And I was so incredibly fortunate to be able to do that. I graduated from Amador High, I went to Chabot, and surprised everyone and did okay, and then I transferred to Cal State Hayward. I played in the bands that entire time, majored in geography. I was able to get a county job as an inspector for weights and measures. All that time playing my horn as my kids were growing up. My first wife was a hospital nurse, but she worked every Wednesday night. So every Wednesday night, my brass quintet was in my front room, serenading the neighbors. Warm summer nights, we leave the door open. People would be out for a walk. They give us a little applause, encouragement, and I've just been so very fortunate.
I would say, kind of in retrospect, like the students that met me that first day, to pay it forward. That if ever given an opportunity to pay it forward, do, because you'll never go broke paying it forward.
I think of all of us here, because of the different things that we had to do to juggle, I think that's why it's easy to deal with life, because you've experienced that. I always tell people, I said the best thing is to have experiences, and that's how you learn. So if you have good experiences, whether they're good or bad, but you're going to learn from those. And so, that would be something that, I would tell the students, that's, you got to have life experiences, and the more, but communicate. It's a big deal. However you do that, it's better in person. Obviously, you get a lot more of that. But the cell phone, to your point, the smart things can take away that personal interaction.
You don't know what you don't know. You just go in and people will tell you can't do it. Well, you don't know you can't do it, so just do it. At least give it a try. Whether you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So, give it a shot.
Yeah, I would say, get out there, get out of your comfort zone, meet people, and, make relationships with people that, people that you support, people that support you. It's different. Academics are different now because that's such a important part of, I even know with my kids, they were studying 2-3 hours a night. So they're very structured, but find time for people, find time for friends. That would be my message. That served me well.
If you're doubting yourself and your value and your worth, look to your friends, because they see you in such a different light than you see yourself. And lean on your friends and find adults that you can turn to that can support you and that can help you through tough times. Because as adults, as an adult now, as a 44-year-old, I know that life has ups and downs and ups and downs. And when you're in a down, especially as a kid, you don't have the perspective to understand that, things are going to get better. And they might get kind of bad, and then they'll get better. And that's just what life is. And I feel so strongly that having a meaningful life with all of the ups and the downs, the byproduct of that is going to be happiness. And I believe so strongly in the power of human connection, and that is lost on kids right now. And I would encourage kids to, when you're with your friends, put your devices away. when you're with your family, put your devices away and focus on those connections, because that is what is really going to stick with you. And when I look back on my time in high school, what sticks with me are the people that I connected with. So I would say that is so critically important. I would say enjoy being young, enjoy having little responsibilities, enjoy the familiarity of being here in Pleasanton. You'll miss it once you leave. And like so many of us, you might come back. I went to school in Washington, D.C., but I came back here to get married and raise my family. I would say, too, that everyone is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. So be kind, always. Be kind. You never regret being kind. And the last piece of advice I will give is from Ferris Bueller, who said, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
I remember when I was at Amador feeling an incredible pressure. And pressure from society, from my parents, from the teachers, that you needed to know who you're going to be, you need to know where you're going, you need to know why you're working really hard, not even question about if you're working really hard, but you just have to, and you have to know in your heart why. And I didn't know why. I didn't know what I wanted to be, and I was very confused, and of course, teenage hormones, I was just mentally all over the place. I think the best advice that I would give to students is that life is a nice long process. You don't need to know where you're going right now. You don't need to know where you're going to end up. You definitely don't need to have everything figured out. Just find what makes you happy, find the things that you feel like you should know and you should be doing. Take solace wherever you can and keep your eyes open. You'll find the things that are important to you. It may take many years, and if people keep asking, well, just be a broken record and say, haven't found yet, haven't found yet. Don't let it get to you. And for all the horrible pressures of school and everything that they might tell you could go wrong if you don't take it seriously, well, guess I'd put it like this. I graduated a C+ student. I didn't think I had anything going for myself. I wanted to go to college. I found out Las Positas, I could do general ed and then go to a 4-year college. By the time I left Las Positas, I had a B+ average. There are so many ways that life improves tremendously. Many ways that it becomes much more challenging and will throw curveballs at you, but you don't have to figure everything out right now. I think that's the best advice I can give.
I would tell them to take school seriously and stay in school and enjoy those days that you have, because those are going to be the most simple days that you have, or at least close to the most simple days that you'll have in your life.
I think try to enjoy your time in high school as much as you can, because I know it'll go by fast. I feel like, I don't know, maybe it was because of COVID, like we had a year online or whatnot, but I feel like high school went by so fast for me, and I wish I'd like slowed down a little bit more and just taken the time to enjoy it. Go to the sports games, do the rallies, do the spirit day.
Amador.